Welcome again to this installment of Moments with Mike as we finish the 11th chapter, verses 7 through 10 in the book of Ecclesiastes. Have you ever noticed that there are times that the men and women who wrote Scripture speak to a certain demographic? For example, in Titus chapter 2, young men are mentioned, and older men are mentioned, and young women are mentioned, and older women are mentioned. In the beginning of Proverbs in chapter 1, specifically, I believe it's in verse 5, where Solomon says, I'm writing these so that young people would come to a place of wisdom. I'm not suggesting that Proverbs is only for the young, but it seems that they're mentioned quite frequently and quite powerfully in that first chapter. Here we have in verses 7 through 10, especially in verses 9 and 10, the mention of childhood and the prime of life. Now, I'm far past childhood. I'd like to think I'm still in the prime of life. But I would suggest I'd like to start today with verses 9 and 10 and read with you and then draw some principles out from those two verses. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know that for all these things God will bring you into judgment. Remove vexation from your heart and put away pain from your body, for youth and the dawn of life are vanity. I'd like you to just allow me to drop 3 little thoughts into your mind today. The first is some verses 7 and 8, and it's this: enjoy the time that you have. Someone once said that youth is such a wonderful thing, it is a shame that it's wasted on the young. That was from the pen of George Bernard Shaw, one of England's greatest playwrights. Enjoy the time that you have. Energetically explore and pursue the opportunities that are put before you. I'd like to think that you and I share in common that every day is a gift from God and needs to be used well. I would also like to suggest to you, though, that verses 7 and 8, it's important for us to understand that we will not have this day back. This is the day that we have. Yes, we remember the psalmist said, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I understand that, and I agree with that. But this is the day I have. Matthew 6 and verse 34, one of the few King James verses I remember from my childhood. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. We're not to think too much about tomorrow because, again, today has enough trouble of its own, but enough blessing too, and enough joy, enough good people, enough opportunities for service. In other words, number 1, enjoy the time that we have. Number 2, from verse 9, evaluate the manner in which we live. Watch over your heart. Watch the direction that your eyes are looking toward, because your feet will almost surely follow. I want to take a look at verse 9 specifically when it says, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and the sight of your eyes. But know for all those things, God will bring you into judgment. Young men and women who might be watching this, and all of us of various ages as well, understand that there is an accountability. There's not only an enjoyment of every day that we ought to be about, but there's an accountability of every day. When I was much younger, I read a book that really influenced me. And one of the ways that influenced me the most was that at the end of the day, to set aside some time, whether it was with Cindy or with my children or just by myself, to evaluate the day, to review the day, and ask myself, how well did you live that day today? What might you have improved upon during that day? How did you treat people? How graciously did you respond to the people around you that day? How might I have spent this day in a better way? And what great enjoyment came from this day? lots of questions. But we do need to evaluate. You'll remember I've told you many times, Socrates' great line, the unexamined life is not worth living. So we not only need to enjoy verses 7 and 8, but we need to evaluate verse 9. And then number 3, from verse 10, eliminate anxiety from your mind and evil or trouble from your flesh. Vexation. I love the word vexation. Vexation is a King James word. It has the idea of anxiety. It has the idea of tension. It carries with it that which would prick you, that which would disturb you, and so forth. And as much as possible, you and I are called to eliminate anxiety and worry, because it will be not just points of distraction to us, but leads us into the fertile ground of disagreement and disappointment at times as well. I read an article once that General Motors had a survey that said that 92% of what people worried about were things they could not change. They were either in the past or there was no ability for us to control and or change them. Eliminating anxiety from our minds and trouble from our flesh is wisdom. Is wisdom. And I think it's one of the things that we need to continue to grow on. There's no shortage of that going on around us that can attach itself to us and provoke anxiety and apprehension, concern, fear, and worry. On the other hand, there's no lack of temptation that surrounds us either that might seduce us to places of succumbing to that which God would rather have us stand tall and avoid. So for young men and women listening to this, and for all of us, we need to be about learning how to trust and replace worry with worship, and to replace anxiety with just a calm assurance that God is in control. God is in control. God is in control.